The galaxy's greatest mystery. Before we begin this story, drop a quick hello in the comments and tell me where you're watching from. It really helps the channel grow. In the year 2847, Earth was nothing more than a footnote in galactic history. The Council of United Worlds had classified it as a dead heritage site, a planet whose inhabitants had mysteriously vanished 3 centuries ago, leaving behind empty cities and silent monuments. Most species avoided Earth, considering it cursed or haunted. But Dr. Zyx Thor, a Krellian archaeologist with crystalline blue skin and 4 curious eyes, had made it his life's mission to understand what happened to humanity. An unexpected discovery. Zyx Thor's research vessel descended through Earth's atmosphere on a cold morning in what used to be called October. His scanners had detected something impossible, a thermal signature in what remained of New York City. Something living. Something warm-blooded. After 300 years of silence, life had been detected on Earth. His ship landed softly on the cracked pavement outside a massive stone building that had somehow survived the centuries. The structure was covered in vines and moss, but Zyx Thor's translator identified the fading letters above the entrance: Public Library. The woman who refused to leave. Inside, surrounded by millions of books in various states of decay, sat an elderly human woman. She looked up from the book she was reading as Zyx Thor entered, her gray eyes showing no surprise, only quiet acknowledgement. She appeared to be in her 90s, with silver hair tied back and wearing clothes that seemed handmade from old fabric. "I wondered when someone would finally come," she said in perfect English, though Zyx Thor's translator made her words understandable to him. "My name is Margaret Chin. I've been waiting for you." Zyx Thor's 4 eyes widened in shock. "You're human? How is this possible? The evacuation was 300 years ago. You should be dead?" Margaret smiled gently. "Yes, I suppose I should be. But I couldn't leave. Not until I finished my work. The story of humanity's choice." Margaret stood slowly, her movements showing age but also a surprising strength. She gestured for Zyx Thor to follow her deeper into the library, past towering shelves filled with books, past reading rooms where dust danced in beams of sunlight streaming through broken windows. 300 years ago, humanity faced a choice, Margaret explained as they walked. The galaxy offered us membership in the Council of United Worlds. We could leave Earth, join the great civilization among the stars, access technology that would make us nearly immortal, cure every disease, solve every problem. And humanity accepted, Zyx Thor said, recalling his historical research. The entire population left Earth within a single year. It was considered the most successful species integration in galactic history. Margaret nodded. Yes, almost everyone left. But not everyone. Some of us believed that in our rush to join the stars, we were abandoning something precious. Our books, our stories, our history, all of it would be lost. The Council's knowledge systems were digital, perfect, and efficient. But they didn't understand the value of physical books, of handwritten notes, of the imperfect beauty of human creativity preserved on paper. The last librarian's mission. They entered a vast reading room where Margaret had clearly been living. There were sleeping quarters in one corner, a small kitchen area, and everywhere, were books. But these weren't just stored, they were organized, catalogued, preserved with obvious care and love. "I was the head librarian here," Margaret continued. "I was 52 when everyone left. I had a choice: join my family among the stars or stay behind to preserve humanity's written legacy. I chose to stay." Zyx Thor felt his respiratory system flutter with emotion, a Krellian response to profound respect. "You stayed alone for 300 years? How did you survive?" Margaret smiled. The Council's evacuation was thorough, but they left behind technology they considered obsolete. I scavenged medical equipment that extended my life far beyond normal human limits. I grew food in what used to be Central Park. I collected rainwater and used solar panels for power. It wasn't comfortable, but it was enough. And I had company. She gestured to the books around them. Millions of voices, millions of stories. I was never truly alone. The impossible task. But why? Zyxthor asked. Surely you could have taken the books with you to the stars? The council offered to digitize everything, Margaret explained. They said physical books were inefficient, that digital storage was superior. And they were right, in a way. But they didn't understand that books are more than just information. They're objects with history, with weight, with smell and texture. This book, she picked up a worn volume from a nearby table, was published in 1851. It's been held by thousands of hands, read in countless places, carried through wars and peace. That history, that physical connection to the past, can't be digitized. She walked to a wall covered with handwritten lists. For 300 years, I've been cataloging, preserving, and protecting these books. I've created a system that future scholars can use to understand not just what humans wrote, but how we lived, what we valued, what we feared and loved. A guardian's dedication. Zyxthor looked around the library with new eyes. He had studied dozens of extinct civilizations, but he had never met someone who had sacrificed everything to preserve their culture's memory. You gave up immortality, gave up seeing your family again, gave up the stars themselves, for books? Margaret's eyes were gentle but firm. I gave up those things for what books represent. For the idea that every voice matters, that every story deserves to be remembered, that culture and history are worth preserving even when they seem inefficient or outdated. The Council's digital archives are magnificent, but they lack something human, the imperfect, beautiful messiness of physical creation. She moved to a window, looking out at the overgrown city beyond. Humans always had a strange relationship with technology. We created amazing things, but we also understood that not everything valuable can be measured in efficiency or logic. Sometimes, you preserve things simply because they're worth preserving. Sometimes, you stay behind simply because someone needs to. Zyxthor understood then that he hadn't just discovered a survivor of humanity's evacuation. He had discovered something far more important, proof that humanity possessed a quality the Council had never properly appreciated. A stubborn, illogical, beautiful dedication to preserving meaning over efficiency. Will you help me? Margaret asked quietly. Will you help me share these treasures with the galaxy? Not as data, but as they are, physical, imperfect, and precious? Zyxthor felt all four of his eyes filling with emotional moisture, a rare response for his species. Yes, he said. Yes, I will help you. But first, you must tell me everything. The galaxy needs to hear your story. Margaret smiled. Then let me make some tea, and I'll tell you about the 300 years I spent as Earth's last librarian. Sharing the discovery. Dr. Zyxthor's broadcast to the Council of United Worlds caused an immediate sensation. The news that a single human had survived on Earth for 3 centuries, dedicating her impossibly extended life to preserving physical books, sparked debates across 40 systems. Within days, Margaret Chen became the most talked about being in the galaxy. The Council sent a delegation immediately. They arrived in a massive diplomatic vessel, bringing doctors, historians, and officials who wanted to understand how Margaret had survived and why she had chosen to stay. But Margaret had only one condition for meeting them: they had to come inside the library, sit down, and read an actual book before she would speak with them. Teaching the galaxy to read. The lead diplomat, a towering Vraxian named Kolrath, was confused by this request. We can access any information instantaneously through our neural implants, he explained patiently. Why would we need to physically read when we can simply download knowledge directly? Margaret handed him a worn copy of a novel written 200 years before the evacuation. Because this book will teach you something your implants never can. Sit. Read. Experience it. Reluctantly, Kolrath sat. His 7 fingers, designed for manipulating advanced technology, awkwardly held the book. He began reading, expecting nothing. But as the story unfolded, a tale of love and loss during humanity's early space exploration, something strange happened. He felt the pages between his fingers. He noticed the faint smell of old paper. He saw handwritten notes in the margins from previous readers, comments and observations from people long dead. For the first time in his 200-year career, Kolrath experienced information not as data transferred instantly to his brain, but as a journey taken slowly, physically, with time to think and feel between each page turn. When he finished 3 hours later, he looked at Margaret with new understanding. "This is different," he said slowly. "I didn't just receive information. I experienced something." Margaret smiled. "Now you begin to understand. The human difference." Over the following weeks, Margaret conducted what she called reading sessions with visitors from across the galaxy. Scientists, politicians, artists, and ordinary citizens came to Earth to experience what she had protected. Many found it frustrating at first. Reading was slow, inefficient, sometimes difficult. But gradually, they began to understand what Margaret had been trying to preserve. A Krellian poet discovered ancient human poetry and wept crystalline tears at the raw emotion preserved in physical verse. A Thraxian engineer found old technical manuals and marveled at how humans had documented not just what they built, but why they built it, including their failures and doubts. A young Valonian student discovered children's books and laughed for the first time in her life at the silly, imperfect drawings and simple stories. "Your species," observed Sharera, a wise elder from the collective mind civilization, "understood something we forgot in our rush toward perfect efficiency. Knowledge isn't just information. It's context, emotion, experience. These books preserve not just what humans thought, but how you felt while thinking it." The truth about the evacuation. As Margaret worked with the galactic visitors, she finally revealed the full truth about why she had stayed. The council never understood that humanity was conflicted about joining them, she explained one evening to ZYX Thor and the gathered delegation. "We wanted the stars, yes. We wanted the technology and the opportunities. But we also knew we were giving up something precious, our independence, our unique way of seeing the universe." She walked through the library, her voice echoing in the vast space. Most humans chose the practical path. They joined the council, accepted immortality treatments, integrated with galactic civilization. And that was their right. But I represented those who believed that preserving human culture in its original form was worth any sacrifice. "You speak of sacrifice," Kolrath said, "but you don't seem bitter or regretful." Margaret laughed. "Bitter? I've spent 300 years surrounded by the greatest collection of human thought ever assembled. I've read works that would have taken a dozen lifetimes to experience. I've touched books that Shakespeare might have held, stood where Lincoln walked, preserved letters written by people whose names are forgotten but whose words deserve remembering. How could I be bitter?" A proposal that shocked the galaxy. Then Margaret made a proposal that stunned everyone. "I want to establish the first physical library in the Council of United Worlds. Not a digital archive, those already exist and serve their purpose. But a place where beings from any species can come to experience physical books, to learn the lost art of slow reading, to understand that efficiency isn't always the answer." The council representatives exchanged uncertain glances. Such a project would be expensive, impractical, and serve no obvious utilitarian purpose. It went against everything modern galactic civilization valued. But ZYX Thor spoke up. "I support this proposal. In studying dead civilizations, I've learned that those who survive aren't always the strongest or smartest. They're the ones who remember who they were and where they came from. Margaret has preserved something the galaxy needs, a reminder that not everything valuable can be measured in data transfer rates." The vote that changed history. The debate lasted for weeks. Some council members argued that resources shouldn't be wasted on outdated technology. Others saw Margaret's library as a museum piece, interesting but impractical. But gradually, support grew. Species who had lost their own cultural heritage to the relentless march of technological progress saw in Margaret's dedication a chance to reclaim something they hadn't realized they'd lost. The vote came down to a single deciding voice, the Eternal Mother, the oldest living being in the galaxy, who had remained silent throughout the debate. When she finally spoke, her voice carried the weight of 30,000 years of wisdom. "I remember," she said slowly, "when my species first developed instant knowledge transfer. We celebrated, believing we had solved the problem of ignorance forever. But we lost something in that transition: the joy of discovery, the patience of learning, the satisfaction of understanding earned rather than downloaded. This human stubbornness reminds us that progress and preservation aren't opposites. Sometimes, holding on to the old ways makes us wiser, not weaker." She cast her vote in favor of Margaret's proposal. The Library of Worlds. Within a year, the construction began. On a neutral station orbiting a beautiful binary star system, architects from 20 species collaborated to build something unprecedented: a physical library containing books, scrolls, tablets, and written works from every member species of the Council. Margaret supervised the project, though she was now being treated with experimental medical technology that would, the doctors hoped, extend her life another century or more. She walked through the construction site, her aged eyes bright with joy, as workers installed climate-controlled chambers for delicate paper, built reading rooms with natural lighting, and created spaces designed for quiet contemplation rather than efficient information access. "It's beautiful," she whispered to ZYX Thor during one inspection. Every species contributing their physical works, sharing not just what they know but how they preserved that knowledge. "Look, the Krellians are bringing crystal and texts that sing when touched. The Thoraxians are contributing metal plates inscribed with their founding philosophies. Even the digital collective minds are creating physical representations of their most important algorithms." The grand opening. The opening ceremony of the Library of Worlds attracted representatives from every council species. Margaret, now recognized as humanity's informal ambassador, stood at the entrance. She looked tiny next to the massive beings around her, but her presence commanded attention. "This library," she said in her speech, "represents a simple truth that humans learned long ago: not everything new is better, and not everything old is obsolete. We live in an age of instant knowledge, but wisdom requires time. We can download information, but understanding requires experience. These physical works," she gestured to the millions of items behind her, "remind us that the journey of learning matters as much as the destination." She paused, looking out at the assembled representatives. 300 years ago, I chose to stay behind while my species went to the stars. I thought I was just preserving books. But I was really preserving an idea: that every civilization has value, that every culture deserves remembering, that efficiency isn't the only measure of worth. This library is proof that sometimes the most impractical choices create the most meaningful legacies." The legacy continues. In the years that followed, the Library of Worlds became one of the most visited sites in Council space. Young beings came to experience physical reading for the first time. Scholars researched original sources instead of digital copies. Artists found inspiration in the imperfect beauty of handcrafted works. Margaret lived another 80 years after the library's opening, serving as its first chief curator. She taught thousands of beings the art of careful reading, the joy of discovering margin notes from previous readers, the satisfaction of closing a book and taking time to reflect on what had been learned. When she finally died at the age of 412, ancient even by council standards, her funeral was attended by beings from every member species. They didn't mourn her as a human who had sacrificed everything. They celebrated her as the woman who taught the galaxy that preservation and progress could coexist, that the old ways and new technologies both had value, that sometimes stubbornness in defense of meaning was the most practical choice of all. What humans taught the galaxy. The Library of Worlds stands today as Margaret's monument. But her real legacy isn't the building or the books. It's the idea she protected for 300 lonely years on an abandoned Earth: that every voice matters, every story deserves preservation, and that cultural heritage is worth any sacrifice. Humans, the galaxy learned, possessed a unique gift. They understood that efficiency wasn't everything, that logic couldn't measure meaning, that sometimes the most important things couldn't be downloaded or optimized or improved. Sometimes, they just needed to be protected, cherished, and passed down through careful, deliberate, physical connection across generations. Margaret Chen, the last librarian of Earth, taught the galaxy what it meant to be human. She showed them that humanity's strength wasn't in matching alien technology or achieving immortality or conquering the stars. It was in the stubborn, illogical, beautiful insistence that meaning matters more than efficiency, that heritage deserves protection, and that some things, like books, like stories, like the physical touch of pages held by countless hands across centuries, are worth preserving simply because they're precious. The galaxy had offered humanity the stars. Margaret Chen had shown them that sometimes the real treasure was what you refused to leave behind. A message to our viewers. If you've listened all the way to the end, thank you. Please leave a comment telling me what you thought of Margaret's story and her choice to stay behind. Was it worth it? Would you have made the same choice? Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to HFY Nexus Archives for more stories celebrating humanity's unique place in the galaxy. Hit that notification bell so you never miss when we explore what makes humanity special among the stars. I'll see you in the next story, where we'll discover another way humans amazed the galaxy.